hello, hello. Now, what I realise is that this is backwards. Yes, to front. So, you can't really see it. But anyway, we're going to be live in about 2 minutes, 3 minutes maximum. So, just try to be patient. And in about 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, we're going to be back here and we're going to start this webinar and we're going to be showing you how to do part one of Cambridge First Certificate and Cambridge Advanced. The reason that we're doing both is because there are many things that you can transfer over from Cambridge First Certificate into Advanced, and it's very, very similar. So in just about 1 or 2 minutes we will be here and live and waiting for you. Okay? See you soon. Right, oh look at my good friend Picky. Right, here we go then. Let's start. Thank you for the people that are here. This is our very, very first webinar and it's free. And you might be asking yourselves, why are we doing this? And the reason that we're doing this, number one, is basically because we are wonderful, fantastic people and we want to give you something back for free. Anyway, basically, obviously everybody's at home, not going to work, and you still want to study English. So this idea came from this whole situation, and we're going to basically today do the first webinar. It'll be about 20 minutes, I think, okay? And basically what we're going to do is, we're going to give you some top tips and we're going to give you some ideas and different things that you can use in part one speaking of the Cambridge First Certificate and Cambridge Advanced. Now, we're doing these things together because, as I said before, you can transfer many things over from Cambridge First Certificate into Advanced. It's very, very similar, okay? Now, we're going to explain the structure and we're going to talk you through the time and the typical questions and things like this. And then we're going to give you what we have here, which is our top 3 or 4 tips, okay? Now, we're going to be doing this every week, okay? In fact, this week we're going to do today, which is Tuesday, the 21st of April, and then on Friday we're going to do the second webinar, which is going to be Cambridge First Certificate and Advanced, but part 2, which is, for those of you that know, it's the picture round. So basically we're going to do this and we're going to do it every week, and we're giving you something back so that you can see exactly what we do. Okay, now let me get started. For the people that do not know the structure of Cambridge First Certificate and Advanced, part 1 is basically a series of questions that you are asked, and those questions tend to be about you and the things that you like, your hobbies, things that you enjoy, time that you spend with family, time that you spend with friends. Quite simple, basic questions. Now, obviously, part 1 of these, this exam is probably considered the easiest section, and that is probably true. That's not a problem. However, you can score some very good points in this first part, so try not to think that this part is not worthwhile, because it is. It's very important, okay? Now, usually, most typically, this is 2 people in part 1. It's sometimes 3 people, but the most typical is 2 people in pairs. Now, with 2 people, it only lasts 2 minutes, so each person more or less gets 1 minute to answer usually 2 or 3 questions. It depends on your answer. Okay, now, let's talk a little bit about exactly what is Cambridge trying to test in part 1 speaking. Well, of course, they ask you questions and you have to respond. So what they're testing, first of all, is your comprehension of questions. Do you understand the question? And can you respond? Now, if somebody asks you a question, what you have to do is you have to identify the very key words in the question so that you can give the correct answer. Now, some of those questions might be in different tenses. In fact, they will be in different tenses. So, it's very, very important that if you are asked a question which is past simple, you have to give an answer in past simple. Ding! That's obvious. But remember that you would probably be very surprised at the number of people who do not actually answer the question. Now, that's a bit silly, isn't it? But I know that it can be quite nerve-wracking. You can be very nervous in an exam. And so sometimes you basically don't understand the question, or you just don't listen. So, number 1, try to identify the key words in the question. Those key words could be what, or how, or when, or maybe a conditional like would you prefer. So you've got to make sure that you identify the key words first of all. And then, of course, secondly, the key tenses. Are they asking present perfect? Are they asking past simple? Are they asking present simple? So do you need to use what you usually do, or what you sometimes do, or what you always do, okay? These are small things, but if you remember them and you focus your attention, you will score more points. Now, the idea of these webinars that are completely free, and they're about 25 minutes more or less, we are basically telling you some small, easy steps of how to score more points. Now, obviously, when you do an exam, what is the idea? The idea is to score the most points possible. Now, you can speak English in certain levels. Some of you have got advanced, some of you have got intermediate, and some of you have got basic. But the idea here, and the most important thing is, do you know how to do the exam, and do you know the structure? So these are the important things that we're trying to teach you. We want you to score the most points possible. So here we are, step by step, trying to teach you. Other things that they're testing in part 1, well, maybe more for advanced English, Cambridge Advanced, the C1. We want you to use modal verbs, and we want you to maybe use some collocations. Now, those collocations, they make your answers sound more natural. And if you can use natural structures of English and natural expressions or phrasal verbs, this will help you score more points in the exam. So also, we're going to be looking at that and seeing some possible answers and give you a few tips. You might be asking, what are the things that you absolutely need to avoid? Right, well, this is only 2 minutes, this first section, so 1 minute per person. However, that's not a lot of time, but something that you must avoid are short answers, okay? So a lot of typical answers, like what would your ideal job be? Don't just say, my ideal job would be to be a carpenter, because that's a little bit boring. And here's another very important thing about part one. In fact, about the whole speaking exam in Cambridge. We don't want you to be boring, because you're not boring. You are very interesting people, okay? So, just remember something. The exam is very usually on a Saturday, okay? Saturday in Pamplona or in a different city. And remember, examiners, they see on a Saturday probably, I don't know, 100 people or less, but you know, it's a lot of people. So, believe me, after the examiner has seen about 20 different people who've done their speaking exam, basically the examiner wants to go home. Okay, that's not a horrible thing to say. It's just normal, right? So what do you have to do? You have to try to give the examiners something new, something exciting, something interesting. Okay, now if you can stand out from the crowd and do something different, you will score more points. Okay, and that's the whole idea. You need to try to learn some expressions, and you need to try to learn how to answer specific questions so that you're not boring, because we know you're not boring, but this is a different language for you, so what you're trying to do is more difficult. It's important that you give some interesting answers. However, you do only have 1 minute, so let's have a look at some typical questions, okay? I'm going to read for you here some typical questions that happen, that you are asked in both Cambridge First Certificate and Cambridge Advanced, and the differences are very, very. So this is why we're doing this Part 1 First Certificate and Advanced, because many of the questions are very similar. For example, what kind of music do you enjoy listening to? Now, that is such an easy question, but it's a very typical question with Cambridge First Certificate and Advanced. Now, what kind of music do you enjoy listening to? I don't know. You might like techno, you might like rock, you might like folk, you might like indie. Brilliant, okay. Just imagine that your answer, what kind of music do you enjoy listening to? And your answer is, well, I enjoy listening to indie music because it was the first music that I started to listen to when I was a teenager. Okay. Is that answer good? It's okay. Is that answer correct? Yes, it's absolutely correct. But do I really score more points when I give that answer? The answer is not really, okay? It's a correct answer, it's grammatically correct, but what we're going to do is we're going to give you some top tips that make your answers more interesting, to give you more points. Now, the first tip is, like I said, don't be boring. You're not boring, okay? That's easier to say than it is in practice, okay? But the top tip number 2 is about likes and dislikes, okay? Now, the probability that you will be asked a question in Cambridge First Certificate or Advanced about the things that you like, or about the things that you enjoy, or about the things that you think are a good idea, the probability of being asked that type of question is very high. So, what is the top tip? What do you like doing at the weekends? What kind of music do you enjoy listening to? You've got to identify the key words in the question. I enjoy listening to indie music. I enjoy listening to rap music or whatever. However, think about how to score more points. And the top tip number 2 is to try to find different ways of how to express that you like something. Now, there are some really easy ways to do this. Firstly, you can modify the verb like, or even modify the verb love. So imagine I give a different answer and I say, I really love listening to indie music. Wow! Okay, so you've just scored more points because you didn't say like, easy, common, basic verb. You said love. And if you say love, I love listening to indie music, and think about the structure. I love, and then the verb with ing in the gerund. I love listening to indie music. Okay, great. But let's try to be more interesting. Let's try to score even more points. And really the best way to do that is not to say I like or I love. No. The best way to do that is to use a modifier. So you could say, I absolutely love listening to indie music. Now, suddenly, you've just made the examiner's ears start to prick, because the examiner is thinking, now that's what we're talking about. The examiner's thinking, this person has given me something more interesting to listen to. I absolutely love listening to indie music, rather than I like listening to indie music. Right, but how can we get even more interesting? Here's the answer, and it's in 3 different ways, more or less. Let's not say I really like or I absolutely love, which are okay, but let's choose 3 different expressions or collocations. The first one is, I am a big fan of. Okay, now you're thinking, oh, that's strange. Now for Spanish people, this is very similar, because in Spanish we say, soy fan de música, soy fan de fútbol, soy fan de Osasuna, or whatever. In English you can say the same. And you can modify it by saying, I'm a big fan of rap music. I'm a big fan of indie music. Now, if you do this, and this is the top tip number 2, I guarantee that you will score more points in the exam. Okay, what's the other way? So you've got, I'm a big fan of rap music, or I'm a big fan of listening to indie music. The next way is to say, I'm keen on. Now, if you don't understand what I'm saying, we will post this later and we'll type these answers. But the other one is, I am keen on listening to indie music. Or you can modify it and you can say, I'm really keen on rap music. I'm massively keen on indie music. So if you answer this question, the question was, what kind of music do you enjoy listening to? I'm really keen on indie music, so I enjoy listening to indie music, especially when I'm on the bus, when I'm in bed, or when I'm at home, or whatever. Okay, so you try to give your answer something a little bit extra, but if you can use these synonyms, instead of saying I like or I love, you can say I'm a big fan of, really keen on indie music. Or the third one is I am into indie music. So if you are into something, or you are a fan of something, or you are keen on something, there you go. You've just scored more points in part 1 of the first certificate or advanced, because you've given the examiner something different. Okay, and this is the whole idea with Cambridge exams. You have to try to give them something new. Now, let's look at some other typical questions, okay? I've already said, what kind of music do you enjoy listening to? What about this one? Do you like having a routine in life, okay? Do you like having a routine, right? So you could say, yes, I love having a routine. I'm keen on having a routine. I'm a fan of having a routine, and you instantly score more points. Another typical question, what is your favourite way to relax? Now, I know that this sounds repetitive, and it is, but you only do the exam once, hopefully. So, what is your favourite way to relax? Well, I'm a huge fan of fishing, right? And this is true. If you could say, I'm a huge fan of fishing, so at the weekends when I've got some spare time, I love to go fishing with my good friend Mark Dentoom, who's my partner for Real English. You score more points because you give the examiner something new and something interesting, okay? Another typical question, do you enjoy watching sport Why not? Yes, I'm a massive fan of sport. Oh, you've just used that expression, that collocation again, and you probably score more points. So this is the really important thing we're trying to tell you. Try to use these structures and this vocabulary so that you score more points. I'm really keen on watching sport. I absolutely love watching sport. I'm a huge fan of watching sport, especially Osasuna in Sadar. Okay, that type of thing. Okay, what's the top tip number 3? I suppose top tip number 3 are adjectives, basically. What are adjectives? Adjectives are words that describe situations and feelings and things like this. So, what are the typical adjectives that everybody knows? They are good, bad, interesting, scared, angry. So a lot of these adjectives, they describe people's feelings, okay? Particularly good or bad, all right? However, imagine when you do the exam and you're asked a question about, have you seen any good films recently? Another typical question. Okay, what are the key words in that question? Have you seen any good films recently? You're going to have to use a structure that explains that you've seen that recently, which would be present perfect. I have recently seen a brilliant film called, I don't know, okay? Now, adjectives, we're talking about adjectives. So, you don't say it was a good film. You would say it was a fantastic film, a brilliant film, an amazing film. And then, if you use one of those strong adjectives, you can use a strong modifier to make it even better, okay? So don't just say the film was brilliant. You can say the film was absolutely brilliant. Now, something that I've noticed living in Spain for 10 years is that English people, when we speak, we tend to exaggerate a lot, okay? Now, I don't think that that's such a thing in Spanish. I don't think Spanish exaggerates so much, not so much, but in English we exaggerate all the time. We say it was totally amazing, it was absolutely brilliant, it was utterly wonderful, right? Now we exaggerate all the time. If you can the exam in the first certificate and in the Cambridge Advanced, you will score more points because you'll use more expressive language. You will use strong adjectives, extreme adjectives, and when you explain the things that you like, or the last film that you recently watched, or the sport that you enjoy watching, you don't just say it was good or it was not very good. You say it was absolutely amazing or it was utterly brilliant. Now, try to do this at home. Try to find some synonyms for different adjectives, okay? And the two basic adjectives are good and bad, but you don't want to use good and bad. You want to use amazing, brilliant, terrific, fantastic. And if it's bad, like imagine you have to describe the last time you went to a restaurant and you have to describe how the meal was. Don't forget that if you speak in negative ways, like bad things, that's also a fantastic way to score more points in the exam, because when you use negative language to describe things that were terrible or horrible or unbelievably disgusting or filthy, you open up this whole new language that you can use. Negative situation, you can use strong negative adjectives, and you can use the modifier to make it even more expressive. A good example, for example, would be tell us about a restaurant or a meal that you recently had. Now, the restaurant I went to Casa Paco, and the restaurant was absolutely filthy. In fact, we didn't pay for the meal because when it came to us, it was absolutely disgusting. Okay? Now, just using those adjectives, but strong adjectives or extreme adjectives, it means that you would score more points in the exam, and this is the most important thing to remember. So I'm going to go back now to these 3 or 4 top tips. The first one is, do not give short answers in part 1. Okay, if they say, where are you from, and you say, I'm from Pamplona, okay, try to give some more information. But when they get onto the main questions, things like, what kind of music do you enjoy listening to? What would be your ideal job and why? Imagine, in so many questions, you've got to try to give not a too long answer, but don't give a short answer. Try to give some extra information. Secondly, it's very, very likely that you will be asked about things that you like, things that you enjoy, what is your favourite way to relax or favourite thing to do at the weekend. With all those questions, you can easily put into the answer, not like or love, but I'm a big fan of indie music. I'm a huge fan of sport, or I'm keen on fishing, so I love to relax at the weekends when I go fishing with my friend. Or, what was the other one? I'm really into. So, those 3 different ways that you can use, instead of saying I like, or maybe saying I love, you can use these expressions and they give you more points. The third tip was, try to find some interesting adjectives, okay? Adjectives are very important in any English exam, but particularly important when you give these answers in part 1, also part 2, probably part 3 and probably part 4 as well. So try to find some interesting adjectives. Find some synonyms for bad and good, and you will find that you can probably use some of these adjectives in many, many situations or in many, many questions that you're asked in the exam. Okay, my hair's horrible because I haven't had it cut for weeks. So, and what was the last tip? Well, the last tip I didn't actually give you, but something called fillers. Now, fillers are something very popular in Spanish, actually. And if I sort of give you an example in Spanish where people say, pues bueno, es que, pues yo qué sé. Right, these words, they mean nothing. Absolutely nothing. And we have the same words in English. So, lots of people, when they do the exam and when they do classes, we're here, we're speaking English, and in the classes they say pues or bueno. They sound like Marcelo Bielsa, right? Don't say those because that's Spanish. Try to find English fillers, things like well, I guess, I'm not sure, that's a good question. Try to make sure that you fill your time, or you fill the silences with English fillers, not Spanish words and not words in other languages. This is English, remember? Okay? I think more or less we've come to the end here. Again, this is important to remember. This is free. We're going to do this every week. We're going to try to help you to do better and score more points in Cambridge First Certificate. So, on Friday at 7 o'clock, we're going to give you some more tips, and this time it's going to be Cambridge First Certificate and Advanced Part 2 Speaking, which is a different format, and it's testing something completely different. But we're going to do another webinar, and we're going to also give you some more tips. Now, hopefully on Friday, we're going to do the webinar or the live stream from YouTube and not Facebook. But anyway, regardless, what we're going to do now is we'll finish this. We're going to type these answers in the event page on Facebook. Okay, so it would be fantastic if you could give our Facebook page a like. Share it with your friends, and the same with YouTube. Go onto our YouTube channel and subscribe, because in the future we're going to be doing these videos more from YouTube rather than evil Facebook. Okay, so remember, 7 o'clock we're going to publish this on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. but 7 o'clock on Friday for the second webinar, which is going to be part 2 speaking for Cambridge First Certificate and Advanced. I don't think I've missed anything. Maybe I have, but it doesn't really matter. I'm going to be doing lots and lots of these because it's wonderful. Okay? For those people that have joined, thank you very, very much. And come back on Friday. Also, don't worry if we've missed something. We're going to post this video on our social media and we're going to do this over and over. So I hope that you found this interesting and helpful, and hopefully this makes this confinement and coronavirus and all this ridiculous situation a little bit easier to put up with. So thanks for joining. See you all soon. Friday, 7 o'clock.